Welcome to Fireside Stories, a channel offering timeless tales, serene atmospheres, and gentle narration to help you drift off to sleep. Before we begin tonight's story, I'm curious to know where you're listening to us from. Feel free to share in the comments. It always warms our hearts to see our small community spread across the globe. Now it's time to relax. Settle comfortably into your bed or your favorite armchair. Close your eyes, slowly take a deep breath, and as you exhale, feel the weight of the day lift from your body. You don't have to rush anywhere anymore. Let my voice gently carry you toward tranquility. This moment is just for you. When sleep wouldn't come, sleep did not arrive all at once. It never did. It came in small waves. Almost there, then gone again, leaving Daniel Harper staring at the faint shadow where the ceiling met the wall. The room was quiet but not empty. Night sounds filtered in gently. The distant hum of the city, the occasional hiss of steam pipes, a soft wind pressing against old window panes. Daniel lay still, listening. There was a particular hour in the night when the world seemed to loosen its grip, not fully asleep, not fully awake, a space in between where thoughts slowed and memories drifted without effort. He had learned over the years that fighting this moment only made it sharper, so he let it be. The clock on the bedside table glowed faintly. Just past midnight. He exhaled slowly and sat up, pulling the blanket around his shoulders. The apartment was small. One room, a narrow kitchenette, and a window that overlooked a street most people avoided after dark. Daniel had chosen it for that reason. The street felt honest at night, quiet, unbothered by pretense. He stood and crossed the wooden floor, careful not to make noise, though no one else lived with him. The habit remained. Outside, the city rested uneasily. A thin fog clung to the street below, curling around lampposts and fire escapes like something alive but gentle. The lamps cast wide circles of amber light, softening edges, smoothing the sharp lines of brick and steel. Daniel found comfort in that light. He dressed slowly. Coat, scarf, gloves, not because he was cold, but because the act itself grounded him, each movement deliberate, each breath steady. When sleep refused to come, he walked. The night welcomed him without question. The street smelled faintly of rain and old stone. His footsteps echoed quietly as he moved along the sidewalk, hands tucked into his coat pockets. Most windows were dark now, curtains drawn, lives paused. Yet the city was far from asleep. A train rumbled somewhere underground. A door closed softly in the distance. A stray cat crossed the street, pausing briefly under a lamp-post before disappearing into shadow. Daniel walked without destination. He had learned that the city revealed more when it wasn't being asked for answers. There was a rhythm to the streets at night, a slower pulse like a deep breath held and released. Even the buildings seemed to listen, to remember. As he turned a corner, he noticed something he hadn't seen before, a light. It glowed warmly from the window of a narrow building set between two larger ones, almost hidden. The sign above the door was old, the lettering faded and uneven. Hawthorne and Sons, antiquarian books. Daniel slowed. The shop should have been closed. Most places were by this hour. Yet the light inside was steady, golden, inviting in a way that felt intentional. He stepped closer. The window display was simple, a few carefully arranged books, their covers worn but lovingly maintained. A small brass lamp sat among them, its shade casting soft patterns across the spines. There was no sign of movement inside. Still, the light remained. Daniel felt something ease in his chest. He stood there longer than he realized, breathing in time with the city. The fog seemed thinner here, as if the light pushed it gently away. Eventually he continued on, but the image stayed with him. He dreamed that night, not deeply but gently, of warm rooms and open doors, of streets that whispered instead of shouted, of a city that knew his name. When morning came, it came quietly. Daniel woke feeling rested in a way he hadn't in months. He returned the following night, and the night after that. Each time the light was there. Always the same warmth, always steady, never flickering. Daniel began to plan his walks around it, though he would have denied it if asked. He told himself it was coincidence, habit, curiosity. But something about that window felt personal. One evening, as he stood across the street, he noticed a small card taped neatly to the glass, handwritten. "If you're awake, you're welcome." Daniel frowned slightly. He crossed the street and leaned closer. There was no doorbell, no posted hours, just the quiet invitation. He hesitated. Then he reached for the handle. The door opened with a soft chime. Inside, the shop was warmer than expected, not just in temperature but in feeling. Shelves lined every wall, stretching high toward the ceiling. The smell of old paper and polished wood filled the air, familiar and comforting. Behind the counter stood an older man with silver hair and calm eyes. He looked up and smiled as though he had been expecting Daniel all along. "Good evening," the man said softly. Daniel swallowed. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," the man replied. "People who wander in at night usually need something." Daniel glanced around. "I didn't know you were open." The man's smile deepened. "I'm open when I'm needed." Daniel nodded, accepting this without fully understanding why. "My name is Elias Hawthorne," the man said. "And you are?" "Daniel." "Welcome, Daniel." There was no pressure to speak, no expectation to browse. The silence felt kind. Daniel wandered the aisles slowly, running his fingers lightly along spines. Titles caught his eye, some familiar, others long forgotten. Books about cities, dreams, forgotten places. One volume rested slightly apart from the others. He picked it up. The cover was blank. No title, no author. Inside the pages were filled, not with words, but with delicate sketches. Streets at night, lamps glowing through fog, windows lit against darkness. One image stopped him cold. It was the street outside his apartment. Exact. He looked up sharply. Elias was watching him, not surprised. "Some books," Elias said gently, "find their readers." Daniel set the book down slowly. "How did you—" Elias raised a hand. "You don't need to explain. Or understand. Not tonight." The lamp on the counter flickered softly. Daniel felt his shoulders relax. "I haven't been sleeping well," he admitted. Elias nodded. "Cities remember us even when we forget ourselves." Daniel didn't know what that meant, but it felt true. When he finally stepped back into the night, the fog seemed less heavy, the streets less distant, and for the first time in a long while, Daniel felt certain of one thing. This was only the beginning. Daniel did not realize how much lighter he felt until he reached his apartment door. The hallway was dim, the overhead bulb humming softly. He paused before going inside, as if part of him wanted to turn around and return to the streets while they were still awake. There was a sense, gentle but persistent, that something had shifted, something quiet and important inside. The room felt different, not changed, just warmer. Daniel removed his coat and sat on the edge of the bed. His thoughts did not race as they usually did. Instead, they drifted, slow and unhurried, like clouds moving across a wide sky. He slept that night, deeply, completely, and he dreamed of streets he had never walked, yet somehow knew by heart. The following evening, Daniel finished his work later than usual. The office lights shut off row by row as people left, their conversations fading into echoes. By the time he stepped outside, the sky had already deepened into shades of indigo and gray. The city was preparing for night. He walked without thinking, his feet choosing the route. When he reached the narrow street where Hawthorne and Sons stood, the lamp was already glowing, always ready. Daniel smiled to himself and crossed over. The door chimed softly as he entered. Elias Hawthorne looked up from a book he had been repairing. He did not seem surprised. "You came back," Elias said. "I think I needed to," Daniel replied. Elias nodded as though that answered everything. The shop felt even quieter than before. The shelves seemed closer somehow, as if they leaned in to listen. The lamp on the counter cast long shadows, gentle and unthreatening. Daniel wandered again, slower this time. "You walk at night," Elias said after a moment. "Yes, most people rush through the day," Elias continued. "But those who walk at night, they notice what remains." Daniel considered that. "What remains of what?" Elias smiled. "Of themselves." Daniel stopped near a shelf labeled Unrecorded Histories. He pulled out a book at random. Inside were handwritten accounts, short pieces, observations, notes left incomplete. The woman who waited every night at the corner, listening for footsteps that never came. The man who lit a lamp not to be seen, but to remind himself he still existed. Daniel closed the book slowly. "These are real," he said. "They were," Elias replied, "and in some ways they still are." Daniel felt no fear, only curiosity, softened by calm. "Why show me this?" he asked. Elias set his tools aside. "Because the city has noticed you." Daniel looked up. "That's not possible." "Cities," Elias said gently, "are made of people, and people leave impressions. You've been walking the same streets, night after night, listening, paying attention." Daniel thought of the way the fog curled differently around certain corners, how some lampposts seemed warmer than others. "I thought I was just restless," he said. Elias chuckled softly. "So did I once." Daniel glanced up sharply. "You walk too?" "Not as much anymore," Elias replied. "But I remember." The silence that followed was comfortable. "Come," Elias said at last. "There's something I'd like you to see." He led Daniel to the back of the shop, through a narrow doorway Daniel hadn't noticed before. Beyond it was a small room, dimly lit by a single lamp. The walls were covered in maps, not ordinary maps. They showed the city at different moments in time, streets appearing and disappearing, buildings shifting, certain places marked with small symbols, lamps, stars, circles. "This is how the city remembers," Elias said quietly. Daniel stepped closer. One map caught his eye. It showed his neighborhood, and marked just 3 streets away from his apartment was a small glowing symbol. "That's where I live," Daniel said. "Yes," Elias replied. "And that symbol appeared recently." Daniel's chest tightened, not with fear but recognition. "What does it mean?" "It means," Elias said, "that you're beginning to leave light behind." Daniel walked home slower than usual that night. The city felt aware of him now, not watching but acknowledging, like a quiet nod exchanged between strangers who understood something without words. At a crosswalk he noticed a woman standing alone. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped, her gaze distant. Without thinking, Daniel held the door of a nearby cafe open longer than necessary so she could step inside first. She smiled faintly. Something warm settled in his chest. As he continued, he noticed more. A man sweeping his storefront late into the night, humming softly. A young couple sharing an umbrella, laughing quietly. A bus driver waiting an extra moment for a running passenger. Small things, but together they formed a pattern. Over the next few nights, Daniel returned to the bookshop often. Sometimes Elias spoke, sometimes he didn't. There was no pressure to ask questions, no rush to explain. The shop existed outside ordinary time. One evening, Daniel noticed a young woman standing across the street, watching the lamp much the way he once had. She looked uncertain, curious. Daniel felt a familiar pull. He didn't speak to her, didn't approach. Instead, he stepped into the shop and asked Elias for a piece of paper. "What for?" Elias asked. Daniel thought for a moment, then wrote carefully, "If you're awake, you're not alone." He placed the note in the window, beside the lamp. When he stepped back outside, the woman was still there. She read the note and smiled. Daniel walked on. That night he slept deeply again and dreamed of a city breathing in rhythm with his own heart. By the end of the week, Daniel noticed something else. The streets he walked felt familiar, not just known but welcoming, as if they remembered him the way one remembers a favorite path through a forest. He began to understand. This was not about mystery. It was about connection. One night, as he prepared to leave the shop, Elias spoke. "You'll have a choice soon," he said quietly. Daniel paused. "What kind of choice?" Elias met his eyes. "Whether you simply walk the city, or help it remember itself." Daniel felt no pressure, only possibility. Outside, the lamp glowed steadily, and somewhere deep within the city something stirred, patient, calm, and waiting. The note remained in the window longer than Daniel expected. He had assumed Elias would remove it the next morning, or that it would curl at the edges and fall away unnoticed. But each night when Daniel passed by, it was still there, simple, unassuming, illuminated by the warm glow of the lamp. If you're awake, you're not alone. Daniel began to notice how people reacted to it. Some barely glanced at the window, their minds elsewhere. Others slowed, just slightly. A few stopped altogether, reading the words as if they needed to be certain they were real. One night, he saw a man press his palm gently against the glass before walking on. Daniel did not follow him. He was learning that not every moment needed to be witnessed. The city felt quieter than usual that evening, not empty, just softened, as if the streets themselves were listening. Fog drifted in low layers, settling between buildings, curling around lampposts. The air carried the faint scent of rain and metal, familiar and grounding. Daniel walked with no particular destination, letting his breath set the pace. He realized he was no longer walking to escape sleep. He was walking to meet something. At a small intersection near the old tram line, he noticed a woman sitting on a bench. She was wrapped in a long coat, her hands clasped tightly together, her gaze fixed on the pavement. Daniel slowed. He did not speak. He simply sat at the opposite end of the bench, leaving space between them. After a while the woman sighed, a sound heavy with exhaustion. "Do you ever feel," she said suddenly, "like the city is too loud during the day and too honest at night?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Yes." They sat in silence after that, the kind that didn't need filling. When Daniel eventually stood to leave, the woman spoke again. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" Daniel asked. "For not asking anything." He nodded and walked on, feeling the quiet warmth of that moment settle into him. Later that night, Daniel returned to Hawthorne and Sons. The shop felt different again. Not altered, but expectant. Elias stood near the counter adjusting the lamp. He looked up as Daniel entered, his expression thoughtful. "You've been leaving impressions," Elias said. Daniel removed his gloves. "I haven't done anything special." Elias smiled gently. "That's usually how it begins." Daniel glanced toward the back room where the maps were kept. "I've been thinking about what you said, about a choice." Elias gestured for him to follow. In the map room the air felt still, heavy with memory. The maps covered the walls as before, but Daniel noticed new markings, small points of light appearing in places that had been dark before. "They weren't there last time," Daniel said. "No," Elias replied. "They're appearing faster now." "Because of me?" "Because of people," Elias corrected. "You're simply aware." Daniel studied the markings. "What happens if I say yes?" Elias folded his hands behind his back. "You'll begin to notice invitations." Daniel looked at him. "Invitations to what?" "To listen, to pause, to help the city remember what it's made of." Daniel felt no fear, only a quiet readiness. "And if I say no?" "Then you'll keep walking," Elias said, "and the city will still breathe, just without your particular rhythm." Daniel considered that. "I think," he said slowly, "I already answered." Elias nodded. "Yes, tonight." The invitation came sooner than Daniel expected. As he stepped back onto the street, the fog parted just enough for him to see a faint glow further down the road, one that did not come from a lamp. He followed it. The light led him through narrow streets he rarely walked, past closed storefronts and silent doorways. The city felt older here, more layered, as if many nights had passed over these stones. He arrived at a small square nearly hidden from the main road. At its center stood an old fountain, dry and unused. Around it, several figures stood quietly, spaced apart, their faces calm. They were not strangers, not in the usual sense. Daniel recognized them by feeling rather than memory. The woman from the bench, the man who had pressed his hand to the bookshop window, a few others whose paths had brushed his own in subtle ways. No one spoke. They did not need to. After a moment, an elderly woman stepped forward. Her hair was silver, her posture straight. "You noticed," she said gently. Daniel nodded. "We meet when the city asks us to," she continued. "Not often. Only when remembering becomes important." Daniel felt a warmth in his chest. "What do we do?" The woman smiled. "We listen." They stood together in silence. In that stillness, Daniel became aware of the city in a way he never had before. The distant hum of power lines, the slow rhythm of traffic far away, the subtle creak of buildings settling, the shared breath of many lives moving through the same night. The fountain began to glow faintly, not with water, but with light. Daniel did not question it. He simply stood, present. After a time, the glow faded. The group dispersed quietly, each person returning to their own streets. their own lives. Daniel walked home alone, but not lonely. Sleep came easily that night. He dreamed of light moving gently through streets, settling where it was needed most. In the days that followed, Daniel noticed the city responding. The bookshop window drew more pauses, more glances. The streets felt softer, kinder. People lingered in small moments instead of rushing past them. Daniel did not seek credit. He walked. He noticed. He listened. That was enough. One evening, as he passed the bookshop, he saw Elias standing in the doorway. "You're ready," Elias said. "For what?" Daniel asked. Elias looked out at the street, where the lamp glowed steadily. "To become a light yourself," he said. Daniel smiled, feeling no weight in the words, only calm. Daniel noticed the change before he could explain it. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden clarity or loud realization, just a subtle shift, like the moment you notice your breathing has slowed, or that your shoulders are no longer tense. The city felt closer, not crowded, not pressing, just aware. As Daniel walked that evening, the streets seemed to recognize his presence the way an old neighborhood does, not by name but by rhythm. His footsteps fell naturally into the quiet pace of the night. Each breath matched the gentle rise and fall of the city's own unseen pulse. The fog was thinner now, not gone but lighter, as if it no longer needed to hide everything. He found himself smiling for no particular reason. At Hawthorne and Sons, the lamp glowed as it always had, but something about it felt different. Elias stood inside, adjusting a stack of books near the window. When he looked up, his expression was warm but thoughtful, like someone watching a moment he knew would not last forever. "You feel it," Elias said. Daniel nodded. "I think I do." Elias gestured for him to sit. The familiar chair near the counter creaked softly as Daniel settled into it. "The city doesn't ask loudly," Elias continued. "It never has. It whispers. It waits. And when someone listens long enough, it responds." Daniel finished. Elias smiled. "Exactly." Daniel looked around the shop. The shelves, the lamp, the notes that had come and gone from the window. What happens now? Elias poured tea slowly, the steam curling upward like a gentle thought. "Now you stop coming here." Daniel blinked, surprised, but not hurt. "I don't mean immediately," Elias added, "and I don't mean completely. But this place," he glanced around, "it was never meant to be the destination." Daniel understood. "This was where I learned to listen," he said. "Yes," Elias replied, "and now the city no longer needs me to translate." They drank their tea in companionable silence. After a while, Elias stood and retrieved something from beneath the counter, a small brass object. It was a lamp, not large, simple, worn smooth by years of handling. "I think this belongs to you," Elias said, placing it gently in Daniel's hands. Daniel turned it over, feeling its weight. "I don't know where I'd put it." Elias's eyes softened. "You will." That night Daniel took a different route home, not because he planned to, but because the city guided him there. He found himself on a street he had rarely noticed before. Narrow, quiet, mostly residential. One street lamp flickered at the far end, its light weak and uncertain. A woman stood nearby, struggling with a door that refused to open. Daniel approached without thinking. "May I help?" he asked. She looked up, startled, then relieved. "It's been sticking all week." Together they eased the door open. She smiled, thanked him, and disappeared inside. Daniel remained there for a moment longer. The The street felt unfinished. He glanced at the lamp in his hands. Slowly, deliberately, he set it on the small stone ledge beside the building's entrance. He lit it. The flame caught immediately. Warm, steady. The flickering street lamp down the road seemed less lonely now. Daniel stepped back and continued walking. From that night on, the city began to change in small, almost imperceptible ways. Not everywhere, not all at once, but here and there gentle points of warmth appeared. A lamp in a window, where none had been before. A handwritten note taped to a cafe door after closing. A chair placed beneath a street tree, inviting rest. Daniel did not place all of them. Others had begun to notice too. Weeks passed, then months. Daniel's sleep deepened. His dreams grew quieter, less searching, more remembering. He still walked at night, but now it felt less like wandering and more like belonging. One evening, he passed the bookshop. The lamp was gone, the window dark. For a moment a familiar ache surfaced, but it passed quickly, replaced by understanding. The shop had done what it was meant to do. Daniel continued on, noticing something across the street. A young man stood there, watching the darkened window, hesitant, curious, awake. Daniel slowed. He did not approach. Instead, he adjusted the lamp he carried beneath his coat and placed it on a nearby windowsill. Just within view, he lit it. The young man noticed and smiled. Years later, no one could say exactly when the city changed. There was no headline, no announcement, no single moment to point to, but people slept a little better. They lingered a little longer, listened a little more, helped without needing to be seen, and at night, if you walked slowly enough, you might notice it. A warmth in unexpected places, a sense of welcome where none had been before. As for Daniel, some nights he walked, some nights he rested, and sometimes when the city breathed out slowly, he would pause beneath a lamp, any lamp, and feel completely quietly at home. The streets grow still now, the light remains, and the city gently breathes. Sleep well.